Module 10, HTTPS inspection. So HTTPS internet traffic uses the TLS, transport layer security protocol, and is encrypted to give data privacy and integrity. However, HTTPS traffic has a possible security risk and can hide illegal user activity and malicious traffic. Security gateways cannot inspect HTTPS traffic because it is encrypted, right? And that is why HTTPS inspection need to be enabled on security gateway, right? Because encrypted traffic cannot be inspected. Okay, let me first start with the complete encryption mechanism between client and server, right? The role of digital certificate in encryption and decryption. And then I will talk about HTTPS inspection policy that we create in checkpoint, like from where we enable HTTPS option, right? What about the certificate? So, but first let's have very high level overview of uh, HTTPS communication between client and server. And then we'll talk about HTTPS inspection and also HTTPS inspection policy that we create in checkpoint firewall. Very important option, right? And even without enabling HTTPS inspection, a lot of applications cannot be identified by checkpoint. So even checkpoint clearly it states that in order to identify certain applications, HTTPS inspection should be enabled. About content, again, like threat prevention, IPS, there are a lot of software blades, they all need HTTPS option to be enabled. But let's first understand what is HTTPS, right? All right, so I'm not bringing in here like any checkpoint or any gateway between client and server. So let's first understand if here like there is a client, HTTP client, and a server here, web server, and any client machine, right? Transport is internet, insecure transport, internet. So transport is internet. So now if client wants to open a website, HTTPS colon any website, let's say example.com, right? So what happens here? Obviously, first step is like name to IP translation or resolution. How it is done? With DNS server, either local DNS server, enterprise, ISP, Google managed DNS server, or any other DNS server. Then the next step is TCP connection, TCP three-way handshake, and then SSL connection or SSL handshake. So SSL like handshake is done on top of TCP connection. So basically, first like name to IP translation done by DNS, and then TCP three-way handshake, TCP SYN, SYNAC, IAC, and then on top of that, SSL messages are exchanged, SSL handshake. Like a lot of SSL messages are exchanged back and forth between client and server to establish a secure channel or tunnel between client and server. So mainly we are interested in like this SSL handshake only, right? SSL, because you know like how name is resolved to IP address, about TCP three-way handshake, SYN, SYNAC, and ACK. So we are more interested in SSL handshake, HTTPS communication between client and server. We're not interested in other two, right? So straight away, I'm going to talk about this SSL handshake. The purpose, why it is done, why we say like HTTPS is secure, right? Obviously, HTTPS is secure. No security threat, at least during like transport of the data between client and server, at least, right? data in transit, I mean, like that is secure. So what happens, like when client types https colon double slash example.com, because what we understand, like about encryption and decryption, is something like data not sending in clear text or plain text, data encrypted ciphertext and then some header added to the original data, but the data in ciphertext or encrypted ciphertext, right? So now the question here is how, like, data is encrypted. Will that be a symmetric encryption or asymmetric? Because symmetric means like same key is used for data encryption and decryption. Asymmetric encryption means different keys are used. So symmetric means same key is used by both party, client and server, for encryption and decryption. Asymmetric is different keys are used. Different keys like private and public key combination, right? Public and private key combination. So what happens in this HTTPS based communication between client and server, symmetric or asymmetric, right? So basically for bulk data transfer, always symmetric encryption is used for bulk data transfer, right? But in order to generate or compute symmetric key, asymmetric encryption is also used, right? So asymmetric is used to generate a compute symmetric key, right? But for bulk data transfer, symmetric key encryption, because asymmetric is very slow as compared to symmetric. So in bulk data transfer, be that IPsec VPN or this SSL or like HTTPS, symmetric encryption, wherein like same key is used for data encryption and decryption. But how, like same key, I mean, like client and server, they both are sitting in two different networks in two different geographical location, maybe like thousands of miles away from each other, right? In different networks. So how it is possible? I mean, like how client and server, they both would use the same key in symmetric encryption, how keys are computed, right? Because you understand, like if one party, I mean, like if the client or server computes key, right, and transports that key over like public network internet to another party, so that is something a big security threat. Means a client cannot send key with the data. So let's say if client like has computed key, so key cannot be sent along with the data, right? Because internet is not a secure transport. So obviously, like a key can never be sent across public network. It's something like if you have any debit ATM or credit card, and on the back of it you have also mentioned your PIN number, right? So if you have lost your card, then the person like who gets the card will also get the PIN number, a big security threat. Similarly, key obviously need to be computed separately on both client and server. But if they both are computing key separately, client and server, so what mechanism they are going to use? Because how will they both compute same key then? First, a big question, right? Because server, client, so if they both are not going to like exchange or share computed key, they are computing key separately, but the outcome, the end result is same. I mean, like they will both end up in computing same key. So that's how it is done. So that's we need to understand. And apart from that, another important point to understand here is if client wants to communicate with the server name like example.com, right? So client machine like typed in the browser https colon double slash example.com, right? So there should be some guaranteed communication. I mean, like there should be some way, like so that client can trust like the server that yes, I'm talking to the right, correct server. I'm talking with the example.com. No, like similar domain name, no similar site, no like something phishing here, right? So how identity of the server is established, right? How identity is established, how server can convince the client that yes, you are talking to me, I am example.com, I'm hosting the site here, I have the ownership, right? How it all happens, let me break down into different steps here. So let me start with first step. So first, what happens here after like doing name to IP translation after three-way handshake, because as I mentioned, SSL handshake means on top of TCP, three-way handshake. So client sends the very first packet, right, to the server. And the first packet here is client, SSL client, hello packet, right? And here, like supported TLS and RSSL version, and basically transport layer security SSL, like however they both are different, but like most of the time we like use either TLS or SSL. However, SSL is the legacy one, like secure socket layer, like was developed by Netscape, and like SSL 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and then 4.0, not released anytime. And then started this TLS, standardized version. So SSL is like Netscape is like one vendor, one company, and TLS is the standardized version of SSL. So then again, TLS 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, and the latest one is 1.3. TLS 1.3. So TLS is basically a standardized version of SSL. You can think this way that TLS 1.0 is like somewhere like equivalent to SSL 4.0. But still, we use the term SSL handshake, SSL connection, like sometime maybe TLS. So one of the same thing from that perspective, right? So client sense like the supported TLS or SSL version, what version like my browser or operating system supports. Apart from that, like the supported version, another one is like supported cipher suite, cryptography, like encryption, hashing, another method supported by the client. And then also like some session specific data like session ID. Another important field here is SNI, right? Very, very important. Server name indication, right? So basically, SNI is an extension to the transport layer security protocol by which a client indicates which host name, for example, here example.com, it is attempting to connect to at the start of like handshaking process. Means SNI field is something like will contain the domain name, the host name, like example.com here, right? So the first packet sent from client to the server, SSL client hello packet. Now let us assume that server also supports same TLS and SSL version, cipher suite is also supported. All good. Then what happens? Server sends packet SSL hello packet, but server misses. Server SSL hello packet, right? Packet number two. And stating that yes, I agree, I do support like same cipher suite, TLS version, right? Everything. So two messages exchange between client and server. First client sends like SSL client hello packet, then server SSL hello packet. Let me clear the screen so that we can just see more packets here. And there is no firewall here, right? We assume there is no firewall between client and server. So two messages so far, internet here. So first from client to server, and client SSL hello packet, and then next packet from server to client, and server hello packet with accepted cipher suite. And then server also sends certificate here, server certificate plus public key, right? And then the fourth packet again from server to client, and this is something like server hello negotiation done. Three packet, right? So what is third packet? Server certificate plus public key. What is that? So basically server example.com here represent a certificate, a digital document to the client, right? Certificate, a digital document to the client, and this certificate, like obviously the certificate must have been obtained from public certificate authority, internet-based certificate authorities like VeriSign, GoDaddy, or maybe DigiCert, Entrust, Comodo, right? So server like the server team or the organization must have like contacted any public CA, public certificate authority server, and must have like given proof to the public certificate authority that yes, we own example.com, we have the ownership of example.com, we need a digital document, a certificate, a proof from you, right? So the public certificate authority server like the VeriSign, GoDaddy, Digital Cert, after like validation, after checking all the information shared by the server, by the organization, by the company, they must have issued a digital certificate to the server, right? And even before making request to the public CS server, there is another process here, a very important step, and that is done on the server side, and that is known as CSR, generating CSR file, certificate signing request, right? Certificate signing request is something that contains the domain name like example.com and organization name, company name, city, country, plus public key. Public key is also like there in the CSR file. So CSR file is submitted to the public CA, and public CA validate all the information. After doing verification, a digital document is prepared by the public CA, and then that digital document is shared with the like server. And the private key is also generated at the time of generating CSR, but private key is local to the server. Private key is never shared. Private key server has the private key, right? Private key is never shared with anyone, only the public key. So basically the digital certificate obtained from the public CA, right, is presented to whom? To the client. So the digital certificate would have like the common name, like domain name, like example.com, right? Also validity, valid from, valid to, company name, organization name, right? Serial number, issuing authority, like who has issued the certificate, like maybe a DigiCert, right? And many more like information like subject alternative name, and I don't want to like get into like very much detail of it, but a lot of information like mentioned there in the certificate, and it's a digital document, right? It's not a printed document, it's a digital document, and plus public key. So both are like presented to the client. What client does here now? Client first check whether certificate is valid or not. For that, what client does here, client checks like the common name printed on the certificate. If let's say client or user typed example.com in the browser, and the certificate name here, common name is example dot or exampl.com, no e. So there is mismatch of the name, right? Common name not the same here, domain name is match. Immediately browser will generate an error message, right? I don't trust the certificate because the name printed on the certificate is not what like that like I was expecting, right? Because user typed example.com, so the certificate name should be exactly example.com, right? And also client will verify the issuing authority. Do I know like the issuing authority, who has issued the certificate, who has signed the certificate with the public key? Because client browser or the operating system should have like the key and the identity of the issuing authority, right? In order to just decrypt it, in order to identify the certificate. So now the next question here is, if issuing authority, right, the public CA like VeriSign, GoDaddy, DigiCert, not trusted by the client browser or operating system, again we get error message in the browser, or immediately browser gives an error message that I do not trust the issuing authority. Issuing authority is not trusted, right? And where does client check that? So client operating system and as well as browsers, both operating system and browsers, they both maintain list of trusted root certificate authorities or intermediate certificate authorities. So basically client will verify that also, whether certificate is trusted or not, right? Because if certificate is issued by any authority not trusted by the browser, maybe enterprise CA, private CA, so definitely a client will not trust that. Okay, means the certificate should be valid. And how validity is checked? Common name should match validity, even the time period valid. That is also checked, whether certificate expired or within the validity limit. Issuing authority, even in case there are like multiple authorities like intermediate or subordinate, then the chain of trust. So a lot of checks are done, a lot of checks are performed by the client browser, right? For now you can understand this. So far, let me again clear this dashboard. So far, like client to server, first message, like client SSL hello packet, server to client, server hello packet, and then the third packet, server to client, digital certificate plus public key, and then server to client, server hello, done. Now here we understood like the role of certificate. So certificate here, client obviously checks like the name mentioned on the certificate, validity, issuing authority, right? Just to establish identity of the server, right? That if I'm talking with the example.com, so do I really talking with the same guy, like to the same example.com, or am I talking to different like server? So to check that identity, like obviously in server is representing or presenting its digital certificate, and client is checking like the issuing authority, the common name mentioned on that, the validity, and even the CRL list. A lot check is done here, performed by the client. Let us assume that everything is in up to the mark, like validity, yes, certificate is valid, common name is also matching, like the example.com, issuing authority is trusted by the client. Let's say certificate issuing authority is DigiCert, and DigiCert is public CA, trusted by the browser, trusted by the operating system. So yes, client will not have the browser will not have any objection with that, right? Client will successfully validate the certificate. Okay, like I'm talking with the right server, correct server. But what about the public key? Was the role of that this public key? For what purpose it is used? What about encryption and decryption key? Because so far only the identity, yes, established. So client has successfully established identity with the server. So identity is now trusted, known. But what about the other part? Other part, the key, like symmetric key. How do they both compute symmetric key? So what happens now? Client performs some mathematical computation and generate pre-master key. Pre-master key means again it's not the key like that is used for data encryption and decryption. So pre-master key is computed by the client, and this pre-master key need to be shared with the server. But in plain text, no. In plain text, pre-master key cannot be shared. So what happens here? Pre-master key is shared right? From client to server, and basically it's a client key exchange, but not in plain text. This key, pre-master key, is encrypted, right? Encrypted, encrypted, and this time for encrypting pre-master key for this encryption, public key like that was like shared in step number 3. If you look at step number 3, so the public key, right, this one sent by server to the client is used for like performing encryption of what? Pre-master key. So pre-master key is encrypted by the public key, right? So the key is shared with the server but not in plain text, encrypted. And now server has other half of the key, that is private key. So by using private key, this pre-master key is decrypted. And that's what asymmetric encryption is, using private and public key combination, right? So this way client successfully sends pre-master key to the server. So now they both, client and server, would have same pre-master key, the same key here and also here. And if the same algo, the same like in bit length and all that, so after doing mathematical computation, they both will end up in computing same symmetry key. So basically pre-master key is not used for data encryption and decryption. Pre-master key is used to generate compute symmetry key, right? But in order to send pre-master key, public and private key combination is used, two halves of a key. So then like client sends the 6 packet, that now onwards I'll be doing all encrypted communication. So packet number 5th, like from client to server, right? That is client key exchange, means pre-master key is like sent to the server, but not in plain text, encrypted with the public key. Public key and the public key was shared by the server. And then client says that I'm going to change my cipher spec, and then it says like I'm finished. From my side, client also inform change cipher spec, and then client to server again finished. So almost total 9 messages are exchanged between client and server, and the end result is what? Same key plus identity, successful identity. Now, what will happen after successful SSL handshake? Now, client and server, they both can now securely communicate with each other, right? Why? Because now they both have key, so data sent by client, encrypted, ciphertext, and some additional header here sent to the server. Server has decryption key, means the same key basically. Decrypted, again the same will happen. So client and server, basically they both are communicating in ciphertext. Data is, payload is encrypted, right? So any more like man in middle possible? No, not at all. Because if anyone like connected with the internet, if somehow like data is captured by the third person, so the third person would not have like decryption key, so the data cannot be decrypted. So obviously it's very secure communication, means if client and server, they both have successfully negotiated a tunnel SSL connection, so the communication very secure, right? Very much secure, because client and server, if they are like communicating with each other inside the tunnel, very secure. Now let me bring a checkpoint firewall here in between client and server. So what if the firewall is sitting in the middle of communication stream? What will happen, right? So let me bring in here a checkpoint firewall between client and server. So client and checkpoint security gateway and a firewall here, a server here, right? Physical connection. Now, if client and server, again, they have successfully negotiated a tunnel, there is tunnel end to end between client and server. If tunnel is allowed to be negotiated end to end between client and server, so now gateway or the security gateway or firewall sitting in the middle of communication stream cannot perform inspection on the data. Data cannot be decrypted, right? Because the physical path, again, like physical path is exactly the same. Like gateway will send data to the gateway, client will send data to gateway will then just perform initial checks like IP, port base, security rule, NAT, and then will send to the server. Means the data sent from client to server is something like IP TCP. So if data is encrypted and gateway doesn't have key, so you understand what will happen, right? So security gateway will not be able to inspect data, and that's what the problem is. Data cannot be inspected by the gateway, right? So a lot of like software players use in checkpoint gateway, even like your what you call it application control, yes, cannot work properly because a lot of applications in checkpoint that they need HTTPS inspection, means uh, without data inspection application cannot be properly identified. What about threat prevention, like threat prevention blade or IPS, content inspection, content inspection or scanning, even your antivirus, they all cannot work properly. You understand the reason. If the data is like encrypted, firewall cannot decrypt that, means like no inspection at all. So what solution we have in the firewall? What solution we have in the firewall to perform inspection on encrypted data? So the solution here we have is like performing man in middle, MIM, or something like HTTPS, uh, or I can use another term here, SSL Forward Proxy for all outbound traffic, for all outbound traffic. So what we can do, we can configure like a man in middle or SSL Forward Proxy. What exactly SSL Forward Proxy is? A man in middle. So let's say here like client machine and security gateway in the middle of communication stream and server. So man in middle is something like if like two separate tunnels are negotiated, means like if client sends the first packet, that is client SSL hello packet, right? And what server does or gateway does now, gateway sends server hello packet. So gateway will not allow this client SSL packet to reach to the server. Rather, gateway itself will acknowledge the packet. Means like will start negotiation, and the negotiation will happen between gateway and server. So this way, like two SSL tunnels created. One SSL tunnel between client and the gateway firewall, and the SSL tunnel between gateway and the server, right? So data encrypted by client can easily be decrypted by gateway. Inspection will be done here. Software players like application control, antivirus, threat prevention, IPS, content scanning will perform their operation. Once like traffic is allowed, then again will be re-encrypted and sent to the server. So basically it's a proxy concept, right? Proxy means like acting on behalf of others. So client is not allowed to negotiate tunnel end to end. There is no end to end tunnel negotiation between client and server. Client is negotiating tunnel with gateway. Gateway is negotiating tunnel with the server. Obviously, this will impact the performance of the traffic because now encryption and decryption is being done twice, right? One like between client and gateway, and the other between gateway and the server. So performance wise, yes, not good, will impact the performance, throughput will be degraded. But security wise it's very good because nowadays like 70 to 80% like HTTP traffic are like HTTPS based, right? So in order to like perform security checks on encrypted traffic, obviously this SSL forward proxy or man in middle must be configured. And how do we do that? So like what we do, we install a certificate here on the certificate like gateway, and that certificate is like sent to the client in fact, and the gateway negotiate like tunnel with the server, and then different certificate is used there, right? So that's the way like how we configure like SSL forward proxy. And why I'm using SSL forward proxy or outbound traffic, because the first packet, the request packet, is sent by internal client, internal user. And let me take very quickly another scenario. Let's say you have a firewall here, like the security gateway and internal network inside and DMG, demilitarized zone. And in DMG, there is a server, DMG web server, and the traffic coming from the internet site, right, this way, and hitting your security gateway. But what you want that external request, like the traffic coming from like internet site, so get terminated on the security gateway, like the request, let's say HTTP request, terminated where, on the gateway, right? HTTP request means like I'm just taking secure communication example. So that gateway can perform now a lot of security check on the HTTP request, because maybe like the request itself is not legal, right? Maybe a person is trying to hack server hosted or placed in the DMG, right? So this HTTP request, right? HTTP request has some maybe SQL code, or maybe some, like trying to do some cross-site scripting attack, or maybe some other attack, right? Maybe the HTTP get request itself is not valid, or maybe different HTTP method is being used here, right? So in if like the this data is encrypted, there is no HTTPS inspection configured on the gateway, so gateway cannot identify the threat, in fact cannot perform inspection on the data, right? So only gateway can control traffic based on IP and port address only, right? IP and port address, because IP and port address both are not encrypted, external IP header and outermost TCP header, but gateway cannot check data. So in case if legal, there is illegal request, HTTP request is illegal, there is some code injected inside HTTP request, so gateway cannot like check that, cannot verify that. So in order to like perform like inspection on the complete packet, there should be HTTPS inspection for all inbound traffic also. Inbound traffic coming from internet site. So for that, again, we install certificate on the gateway rather than just putting certificate on the server. And all SSL connections coming from internet site get terminated on the gateway. Gateway perform like security checks, and if a request has been found legal, valid, right, then only request is allowed to be routed or sent to the server. So that's another direction. I mean, like the same like we are doing man in middle or proxy or SSL or HTTPS inspection, but for incoming traffic. So yes, both are supported in Checkpoint also. We can like create HTTPS inspection policy for both outbound and as well as inbound. And I hope you understand like the concept of inbound and outbound. And let me put another example here before I just go back to the presentation file, and then later on I will show you critically also how we can enable HTTPS inspection. So another important point I want to discuss here in this section is like what if we want to exempt certain traffic from HTTPS inspection. For example, let's say you don't you want that any traffic destined to financial institution or banking sites, or maybe medical and health based any website, medical and health. So what you want like these traffic to be exempted from decryption. I mean, like you want that internal user should be able to negotiate tunnel end to end. You don't want your gateway to be involved there in decryption for all financial based websites like financial institution or maybe banking, medical and health, because it's very unethical in fact, right? If you are like you have configured your gateway to inspect all traffic, so that's something very unethical, right? So if you want to respect like privacy of your internal users, implies that you want to put like certain categories out of decryption. That is also possible by using HTTPS inspection policy, right? So we can exempt certain URL category or application from decryption. That is very much possible. And how it is done, what uh, technology gateway uses to identify those application traffic. So as I mentioned in the first packet of SSL, client SSL hello packet, there is very important field, and that is SNI field, server name indication. Server name indication. Server name indication. And server name indication is like, for example, here like the site name is, let's say, paypal.com, right? So the first packet, so gateway will look at the client SSL hello packet and will read the information, will read this information as SNI field, server name indication. And if gateway finds like paypal.com as the name, like the host name here, so gateway will check like the URL category. So if gateway now identifies that paypal.com means financial institution or financial banking category, and there is like HTTPS inspection policy not to decrypt, not to inspect, just bypass, right? Bypass. So what gateway now does here, gateway will let this packet to reach server, no man in middle for this, right? So this SNI field in client SSL hello packet plays important role, because a lot of students generally ask me like, if we are just creating policy here not to exempt certain URL or application category, right, from encryption, so how does it work? I mean, like if like data that reaches gateway is already encrypted, and the only way to identify application or URL category is like after doing a decryption, right? And once it is decrypted, and let's say now firewall knows that paypal.com banking site, but data is already decrypted, so there is no point of exemption policy or bypass policy, right? But no, that's not the concept. Here SNI field of the first packet, client SSL packet, plays important role here. So that's the way like how we configure all this. So I hope you understand. So in checkpoint, like we use the term HTTPS inspection, HTTPS inspection. In some other firewall, like maybe SSL decryption policy, but one of the same thing, SSL decryption policy. So SSL decryption policy or HTTPS inspection policy, one of the same thing. And in checkpoint, very easily we enable like this HTTPS inspection option. Particularly, I'm going to show you in the next lecture how we can configure HTTPS inspection. But let me quickly go back to the presentation file so that we can just conclude this theoretical discussion, and then I will particularly show you. So I hope you understand HTTPS has a possible security risk and can hide illegal users. So why HTTPS inspection is required to be enabled in any firewall? You understand the logic, you understand the reason. First reason, like for proper application control, like, and the example, if I take like, let's say we want to control or we want to restrict Facebook chat, Facebook chat. So in order to identify Facebook chat application, there should be HTTPS inspection enabled on the gateway. If HTTPS inspection is not enabled on the gateway, so checkpoint cannot identify Facebook chat, right? So it's not only for antivirus or threat prevention, IPS or code injection attack preventing from that, or maybe content inspection, also for some of the application to work properly in checkpoint, right? And you will find the list there in the checkpoint, like the application that need HTTPS inspection to be enabled. And let me show you that also. So if I open any application from here, application, let me search any application. So Facebook chat. So here is a Facebook chat, and so application signature. What about more info? And look at this. So HTTPS inspection blade is required for application detection. So in order to detect or identify Facebook chat, HTTPS inspection need to be enabled. Similarly, you'll find like for Gmail also. So there are a lot of applications, in fact, in Checkpoint, and without enabling HTTPS inspection, we cannot identify, like Checkpoint cannot identify those applications. So very much required. All right, so let's move on from here. You can enable the HTTPS inspection feature to let the security gateway create new TLS connections with the external site or server, correct? The security gateways are then able to decrypt and inspect HTTPS traffic that uses the new TLS connections. Very true. There are two types of HTTPS inspection in Checkpoint. One like outbound HTTPS inspection or SSL Forward Proxy. So to protect against malicious traffic that is sent from an internal client to external site or server, or maybe to identify applications or sub-applications, even I can use the term sub-applications or micro-applications, right? Also, like inbound HTTPS inspection, yes, like also supported in Checkpoint to protect internal servers, mainly like servers placed in the DMZ from malicious requests that arrive from the internet or external network. So, like there are two types of HTTPS inspection supported in Checkpoint. HTTPS inspection policy. So, HTTPS inspection rules define how the security gateways inspect HTTPS traffic. The HTTPS inspection rules can use the URL filtering categories to identify traffic for different website and application. Yes, for example, as I mentioned, like if we want to create a bypass policy, bypass means like not to encrypt, like for certain URL categories or applications. So yes, like Checkpoint uses URL filtering and application control software blade to identify those applications, right? For example, you can use a rule to ignore HTTPS traffic to banks like financial institution or maybe medical like or health related websites or URLs. All right, so in next section, we are going to see like HTTPS inspection lab, in fact. So I'll be enabling HTTPS inspection. So particularly, I'll be showing you how you can enable HTTPS inspection in your environment, right?